We as a human species are quite arrogant. We call ourselves Homo sapiens, so basically that means really wise man. Actually we call ourselves Homo sapiens sapiens, so really wise man. I would say that we're smart and we're intelligent and really innovative and creative, but we're not really wise. I would instead claim that we are pan-narans, we are the storytelling chimpanzees, because where we are today, that is basically coming from the fact that we can tell stories, and that's one of the main, if not the main difference between us and the rest of the animals. We are able to tell stories about what will happen if this and this, if we do this and this. We're able to tell stories that teach lessons to our young or to us, and we're able to tell stories that confer how we want our society to function and instill the morale lessons in all of us, and we're able to tell stories that create an intelligence in the tribe, so we pass on the combined knowledge of each individual in the tribe. Why am I talking about this? It's because to many of us, role-playing games is the epitome, the cusp of storytelling. It is the ideal form so far. It's the evolutionized storytelling. And a lot of you are interested in how to do that. So, role-playing games, they offer us infinite interaction possibilities that we can't really find in pretty much any other medium. They are highly effective. They're highly engaging. They're fully emergent. So what the players want, that's where we're going. We can create a new story than the one that was originally planned if it fits better with the people that are telling the story. And we get more powerful stories. Also stories that we can't necessarily predict. So today we're going to first talk a bit about what role-playing is. I'm going to do a lecture on a small hour or so. Then we have a Q&A and a break in case some of you have more questions or want us to talk more about specific aspects of what we talked about, and others rather have coffee. Then we're going to do a LARP workshop preparation. So we have a LARP with us that we're going to play, but in the morning from 10 to 13 we're going to make it. It's a framework rather than a finished LARP, so we're going to create it, and you can explore how the mechanics shape a scenario and how you can create characters in relationship with the characters, and then it's much more effective for you to see how that creates story and how that creates play. Then we have lunch, and then we actually play what we made, and finish off with debrief and discussion. So that's it for today. This is Morgan March. He is an educational LARP organizer and a theater pedagogue. He's a top-down and bottom-up kind of guy, and he's one of the world's leading experts on EduLARP. So it's using LARP for educational purposes to teach and so on. He's also just finished a master in teaching in Sweden, and he also has an MFA in ensemble-based physical theater. So a bit of a diverse man, that guy. I'm Bjorn Temte, and I just finished my master's in mediology, focusing on interactive narratives and how you can do them digitally using the techniques from role-playing games, so analog role-playing games. I see myself as the kind of guy that tries to bridge the gap between what interactive digital storytelling researchers are doing on computers with the role-playing community and the practitioners and theoreticians that are looking at the analog work there. I'm also a role player for 25 years now, and I've written prize-winning scenarios, and I'm also a narrative designer. I've designed narratives for several games during my studio time before that, and I used to own a game company as well. community implemented. So, you know who we are now, so let's talk about what's really important. What's role-playing? It's a form of interactive, collaborative storytelling. It's where one or several players each take the role of one or several fictitious characters, and that's the basic of it. Each player then control what these characters do, and everybody tries to keep an internally consistent setting. So they try to maintain the diegesis that works for everybody. Usually one or more players is a game master. So he's like the holder of the story. Everybody is trying to create the story collaboratively, but he's the one that maybe has an idea where we're going to begin with. He's prepared some stuff in advance, and he's the one that decides what happens if the player wants to do something. So my character goes over and he's trying to climb this tree. Okay, you can't, you fall down, break a leg or something. So he's the one that kind of just tries to guide the story. He also takes the role of everybody else in the diegesis. So every non-player character, he's either describing what they do, or that he's role-playing them actively, as acting them out. Players also act out parts of the role-playing, especially the dialogue. Usually the collaborative storytelling is the main purpose of playing. It's not to win. It's not to be better than the other guy. It's to collaboratively create something and have a good time while doing so. Sometimes in role-playing games, we see people dressing up. We see them trying to approach, go out into the forest and try to create their own fictitious world out there where everybody lives, is inside the diegesis, and we know everything outside, but we go, we try to create a new world in our own world. Occasionally we see that like players share the game master role, or they have no game master at all in the role-playing session, or we can also occasionally see that players have several characters, or there are several players all playing one character. It's all fluid, so it's also quite difficult to just go in and say this is role-playing, this is not role-playing, because every time you do that, there's a scenario writer out there that says that's not right. I'm going to write a scenario that disproves that rule. That's usually what happens, actually. As I talked about, the game master, he has the best idea of where we're going with the plot, and he also has some mechanisms to try to keep the players on track, going in that direction which he's imagining. He's also the one that usually controls the moment-to-moment evolution of the emergent story. Role-playing games is basically it's improvisational theater that's performed for its own sake. There can be audiences, usually there aren't, but it doesn't affect the form in the least. Role-playing games cease to exist the moment they're complete. They're ephemeral. You can't see a role-playing game as a whole until you actually complete it. It's actually disappeared. And each player has a unique journey because of all the thoughts and all the considerations towards that or those characters that they're playing. All those thoughts, all those considerations are not necessarily shared by the other players, so you get a unique experience, all of you. And depending on the subtype, they don't necessarily have a shared core experience either of what happened and what the story was. I, as part of my master thesis, coined a formal definition of role-playing games. It's a type of pretend play where participants interact, often through rules, with the diegetic world through the continuous structuring, which is deciding upon the appropriate actions or utterances for the character, and possibly cantering, which is acting out the character, rectoring, which is guiding the story through the actions of the character, and octoring, which is redefining the character itself, again on the fly while you're playing. Of distinct characters with the main purpose of collaboratively co-texturing, exploring the potential story or illusion possibilities, and emergent ephemeral narrative. this is my formal definition based on previous works.
Can we read that one more time?
It's quite a mouthful, and you will have the slides. So if you have questions for this later, we'll pop back to it. But it's not essential. But since you're academics here, well, maybe it's time to ask whether you would prefer that we go deep into some of the academic theories and frameworks that we have for understanding role-playing games, or whether you would rather that we spend more time on examples of role-playing games. Because we can't be here all day talking, with me talking. So, but what's the mood? Who would rather that we spend a lot of time on the academics and the theoretical stuff? And who would rather that we go deep with a lot of examples? Okay, so it's 50-50.
Nah, it's more examples. I'm sorry, you don't get to do.
That's okay. So, but you had a quick question.
What's diegetic?
Diegetic, yeah, we used it quite a few times. Diegetic, it comes from film science actually. It is the fictitious world of, in this case, the game. So anything that is diegetic exists within the game world, if you want. Does that make sense? The story world. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a formal definition. That's
whereas non-diegetic, whereas non-diegetic would be things that comes from our world that doesn't fit the game.
For example, in movies, when you hear background music that the characters in the movie don't hear, then that's non-diegetic music. It's not part of the diegesis. But then the camera cuts to a radio in the corner, and you realize, okay, so maybe it is diegetic music because the characters are there. Good. Yeah?
So, rectoring, cantering, and ductoring, just really quick, because I was one of the people that wanted the academic stuff. Where can I go to read some more about that, or some of the definitive work in that?
My thesis.
Really?
That's the only definitive work with these terms. He coined those terms.
Yeah,
in his thesis.
that's all.
That is awesome.
Okay. So, we're going to scratch the surface with some of the characterization frameworks now. And then we're going to move on to explore a bit more on how role-playing games started and a lot of examples. We have some player types, playing action and utterance typology that Bjorn, you expanded upon or did a different version. I coined the play depth framework, and I did an avatar and player character typology part of my thesis. And then we talked about some general typology that the practitioners, role-playing practitioners, can generally use.
Do you understand what we mean with actions and utterances, since we use it a lot of times?
So a player action is something that you do, and a player utterance is something that you say. And then then we have different typologies to try to categorize whether that action or utterance is in character or in the play. And we try to understand where inside and outside the diegesis this utterance fits. So it's we see generally 4 player types. This is the practitioner's typology. Morgan and myself, we're working on a new version, but it's not really ready yet. But we have dramaticists that are focused on the story, on how to create the story and how to engage with the story. We have immersionists, and they are player character immersion and acting, so they're focused on character and getting into that character, becoming that character, immersing in the character. We have gamists. They're interested in meeting and overcoming challenges and in the rules, in the game structure, and in winning, because you can win in role-playing games, against the monsters at least. Finally, we have simulationists, who are really interested in immersing into the world itself, not necessarily your own character.
Some simulation of worlds rather than the experience of being someone else.
Yeah. The player action and utterance typology. So I have 4 versions. We have the general inside the diegesis and outside the diegesis. So inside the diegesis, you can still be in character or out of character. You're immersed in the character, or you're still inside the diegesis, but you're talking about what your characters do. Outside of the diegesis, you're still in game, but you're maybe discussing the rule system or some such. An off game, you're talking about the football match you saw last week. This is a very rudimentary way of looking at what players are doing and saying, but it works generally. I also did a play depth, so this is 7 layers of how deep you can come in a role-playing game. And where play depth 1 is you're basically playing a board game. You're just sitting there and you're enjoying yourself and you're using the rules to fight some monsters and gain some loot and becoming cool so you can fight bigger monsters. Number 2 is that you're rule-based storytelling, so the players are still sitting around the table, but they're using the rules to describe the character actions and describe what the characters are saying. Number 3 is storytelling, so players are describing what the characters are doing and saying, but they usually speak as their characters. So that's play depth 3. Semi-acting, that's number 4, and players often act out their characters during social encounters, so they actually maybe get out of the chair or they wave their arm and they take on their characters to a bigger degree. Number 5 is full acting, so you're now standing, you're acting everything that's going on. All non-combat situations, maybe also a bit of a scuffle, you're acting that out actively, you're inhabiting your character. Number 6 is you're putting on costumes and you're trying to get the surroundings to look as though it's the didactic world. And number 7 is it's a pervasive role-playing game experience where everything is in character and in play, and you're going for this 360 ideal, and you're even fighting for real. So examples is that for player depth 1 is my character uses his bluff skill to convince him that the sword isn't stolen. He doesn't even describe what the character is saying, he's just saying, so I'm rolling against my bluff skill and I succeed. Number 2 is that Legolas tells the innkeeper that they're going to need 3 separate rooms, since he's definitely not going to sleep in the same room as Gilby. They're still describing what he's saying, but they're describing what Legolas is saying now. It's not just a skill roll anymore. Number 3 is, of course, it's my sword craftsman. Do I look like the kind of person who would carry around other people's swords? I don't think so. So now you're speaking as your character, but you still see the table. This is just, again, this is a bluff roll. Maybe you're rolling the dice afterwards, and maybe the game after will say, okay, that was a pretty good bluff, so you get +2 circumstance bonus to the roll. Number 4 is, how dare you speak to me that way? And I grab Morgan's collar, and now you're really into it, and you're acting out as well. And number 5 is you're really taking on the role, and sure you want to do that. We get fully into it. Number 6 is what most LARPs are doing. So you're taking on the costume, you're being there as much as you can. Maybe you go off play once in a while, but generally you're really there. And but you're still, if you're fighting, there are rules systems of saying. So for instance, I hit Morgan in the arm, and now he's not allowed to use that arm anymore because that's wounded. So you still use some rules to resolve conflicts. And number 7 is that me and Morgan would actually physically fight. Maybe we have arranged beforehand how to do so, or maybe we are wearing padded armor so we don't really actually maim each other, but we would actually go for it. Part of my thesis, I did an alpha-pole nomenclature. There's a typology for understanding which sub-elements of a player character there exists. And I'm not going to go into it now, but we can talk about it later if some of you are really nerdy. The main point of my master thesis was Harris proxy. So it's the degree to which a harassment or player characters, person's game assimilation, so their personality traits and generally just that character's personality, how much that influences a player's action or uncertainties at any given moment. So that was my main focus for my master thesis, and I'm trying to look at whether there was a correlation between this and diegetic adherence, so how much the players adhere to the diegesis. Harassment is my word for the player character. Yeah, read my thesis if you're interested. Now we come to some of the typology and terminology that role players use to describe what is going on. Bleed is probably the most important of those terms, really. And that this talks about, so you're playing a character, you're maybe playing a torturer, and you're torturing one of the other players, and you then stand the risk of maybe as a person experiencing some emotions that are linked to what is going on here. It depends a lot about how much you can separate the person from yourself, and even if you're really good at that, you can still get some unexpected consequences. So, for instance, you can get some bleed in if the torturer releases the victim and helps him escape, or pulls the torture a bit and doesn't really do as much as you would like. Then that's you affecting how the character would behave.
You bleed into the character's action or into the game, your own emotions.
Yeah. And bleed out is when you maybe start enjoying this torture a bit too much.
Because the character bleeds out into your real world.
Yeah.
So the emotion goes that way. The most common example is actually if people fall in love in a game. That's a very hard emotion to contain in a game sometimes. So then it bleeds out, and you're kind of still in love with the character, or even the person behind the character when you after the game. So usually negative emotions don't bleed out. It's more common that positive emotions, friendships that are formed in a diegesis last afterwards and stuff.
Yeah. But it's less shocking.
Well, it's not always what I go for.
I really defined it as flucentio as part of my master thesis. So in flucentio and ex flucentio. It's a Latin word for flow or bleed of feelings, and I argue that bleed is also a term for other stuff. So alibi, second really interesting and important term is alibi is when you are using the fact that you're playing a character to do stuff that you yourself would not normally do. And you can either use that as a psychological mechanism to actually get more in game and more engaged, and you can use that as a validation to yourself that it's okay that I'm the torturer and I'm torturing this guy because I'm playing a character. And we have a magic circle in which this is okay. It's a social contract that we're playing a role-playing game, and I'm the torturer and you're the tortured. So it's really important. Roleplay wouldn't really be able to exist if we didn't have this alibi that we're creating this magic circle.
The alibi also do something very interesting, which is you have rules to cut something that is really emotional. You could say, cut, I don't want to play this, and that's okay. And knowing I have that rule means I go much deeper into something that is really emotionally kind of hard to deal with, which is an alibi to go into something that that leads a lot or have a lot of emotional impact on me. So that way the character can be an alibi, but just the rules can also be an alibi for getting into a game.
Yeah. Again, there's a lot of stuff on this, so talk to us afterwards if you're interested. Steering, new term coined earlier this year, and it's the process in which a player influences the behavior of a character for non-diegetic reasons. So I see a new player, it's his first LARP, and he's sitting over in the corner. I'm playing a prince. My character would normally have nothing to do with this peasant over in the corner. But me as a player saying, so it's important that we get this new player into the game, so I go and talk to him. Or rather, my character goes and talks to his character, even though there's no diegetic reason for doing so. That's steering. Beehive, that means that you sit down for 3 minutes and just talk with the guy next to you about what we've talked about and how you can see using this in your own work.
You can relate it to just talk to each other to process a bit. Relate it to what you've done before or what you are doing here this week or whatever. So you get to work with it.
Yeah.
Go.
don't think